Delegate Greenhalgh has been a successful business entrepreneur and I was surprised and pleased to learn has experience as a parent both with public, private, and homeschooling with 2 children, correct, Mrs. Greenhalgh? But was one of the first Virginia parents to be involved with the Home Educators Association of Virginia in homeschooling. So that background in education. But mostly I would like to recognize that this is her first anniversary in having been elected to represent us in the State House. The election last year got a lot of national attention for the Republicans at the top, Youngkin and Winsome Sears and Miaris, but Karen also joined the team a year ago. And for those of you, again, that are not from this area, you may assume this was a conservative district, but it was not. She unseated an incumbent progressive when she won last fall. So we were very excited about her victory as well and have been pleased to have her in the House for us. She has done a lot of hard work over the past year that she shared with us. Looking forward to her continuing to be able to do that. So having said that, I will turn it over to her. She had offered earlier to share some of her experiences in learning to be an effective legislator and how to deal effectively with her peers. So we appreciate this.
Thank you all for having me here. And I really appreciate the fact that so many people are willing to step up and actually to speak up. And I was pleased to be at the very first meeting of Speak Up Tidewater, where I offered to give advice on speaking to legislators. So what I'd like to do first is just cover the easy ones, which are email and mail. So email, I get so many of those bulk emails that come through services. There's some really good ones like Fast Democracy and Voter Voice. But the truth is, y'all need to know that they typically don't get attention. Once we see that we have one and you get 100 of the same thing come in, they don't get a lot of attention. Now, what I will do is some of those will have the voter's real email address or mailing address in the body. I'll go through and look, and if that's there, I do respond to that email, but half the time they bounce back. And I understand people don't want their real email out there, but if you want the legislator to respond, you need to use your real email address. So, and a mass email is the same thing. Before I ran for office, I did this a lot. I would very carefully write an email, craft it, say what I wanted to say, and then send it to every senator and every delegate. And I very rarely got a response, but now I understand why. If we see those and it's addressed to everybody, it's not a letter to me. It's a speech to everyone. So that doesn't really get a lot of attention either. So what works best is to write your own email address and write your own email from your own email address. And what makes this get attention is in the subject line, put your street address. If you're a constituent, say constituent, put your street address, and it makes it really easy for the staff to look you up, see if you're really a constituent. So for me, I respond to all the emails, but constituents do get priority. The people in my district who need to talk to me or have something they want me to hear, they do get priority. I do respond to everyone, but a lot of delegates only respond to those that live in their district. So just make sure you have that in your subject line. And mail is still the best. And with mail, a handwritten envelope tends to get opened. A handwritten envelope with a handwritten card inside is the best. I had one constituent, y'all know this was my first session, and one constituent every week, I got a handwritten card from her. Wasn't political, wasn't issues, wasn't about bills. It was just, hey, I know why you're there. I know you're working, want you to know we're thinking about you. And when we had crossover week, that was so busy. I got a card that said, I know this is your busiest week. Want you to know we're still thinking about you and we're praying for you. So if you want to make sure that your legislator reads it, it's best if you hand address the envelope. And the letter could be typed, but at least sign it. And so those will really help. So now we're to in person, and that's really what I wanted to talk to y'all about. In person is what's so difficult. I know, because that's how I got started in this. And I'll never forget when I first started going to see legislators, the very first one, I was so nervous and I had no cards and my hands were sweating and we were meeting at a Starbucks and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to see a legislator. She's in the General Assembly. I was so nervous. And after I got a few of those under my belt, I realized they're just regular people like me. They don't know everything. So it's not right to expect them to know everything. But they still deserve respect because they represent they represent constituents. They've been elected to office. So they should be treated respectfully, but don't expect them to be an expert on any subject any more than you're an expert on any subject. And odds are you're going to them with the subject and you may very well know more than they do. That's not a strike against your legislator. It's just because they're regular, normal people who have stepped up just like y'all are stepping up. So we've all heard stories. I've heard it so many times. People say that that legislator hides from me, or that lobbyist is avoided. And there are some legislators who avoid constituents, but sometimes it's the fault of the constituent. So I have found there are people who come to see me, and sometimes they're people I really would rather not have to talk to again. And we're going to get into the reasons why. But very often they are people, I've met people through emails, at their doors, just talking out. I go in the grocery store now and people say, aren't you Karen? I still can't get used to that. But I talk to them about a subject and they become my go-to person. I have people that I've met in my district, and whatever the subject is, I think about that person. Can I go to that person and get another opinion? Does that person know this is going on? And so it's up to you. When you go to talk to your legislator, are you going to be the person everyone avoids? But what you want to do is be their go-to person. So as far as preparing for the meeting, first you need to establish what the allotted time is. You need to know how much time you have with your legislator so you can make sure your key points are covered before you run out of time. And tell them upfront what your topic is. A lot of times people try and catch me off guard, which is very unsettling. That's not a way to build a relationship. So let them know upfront what you're going to talk about. Most legislators don't mind. I talk to people, even if I know we're going to disagree, as long as people are civil, we can still have a conversation. And never assume what your legislator knows or doesn't know. And I'll never forget, I was talking to our Lieutenant Governor, Winsome Sears, one day, and I said, you know, you might know this already, but I want to tell you. And she interrupted me and said, that's exactly what you do. Never assume what I know. If there's something you think I need to know, it's your job to make sure that I know it. So the goal of your meeting is not to tell him what you think he needs to hear, but you need to figure out how to tell him what he needs to know. So when you go prepared, you're going to know your main points. You're going to be prepared for the most common arguments or whatever. What do you hear most commonly as far as questions or, you know, positions against what your subject is? And it's fine to take notes. I made jokes about going with my note card because I was so nervous, but it's fine. Like if there's a Supreme Court case that you like to refer to, I'd be willing to bet when you're in the middle of a conversation with someone you're not agreeing with and you're trying to stay calm, you're liable to forget the name of that Supreme Court case. It's fine to write those things down so that you have them on hand. So the goal of meeting is not just to come in and tell me what you think I need to hear. It's not just you giving me your opinions so that I'm going to see the light and agree with you. So many people come in and they can spend 15 minutes talking nonstop and think when they're finished, I'm going to agree simply because I know everything they had to say. A conversation doesn't work that way. So that's what your goal is. Your goal is to have a conversation, not give a speech. So you want to make a good impression and have a positive connection. and leave with the door open so you can be the go-to person, or at least be the person that this legislator is willing to talk to again. Suppose after you meet your legislator, and this has happened to me, your legislator thinks about what you talked about and has a question, or is reading an article and says, wait a minute, this article is about what that lady told me about the other day. I wonder if she can explain this better, because what she said isn't exactly what I'm reading. So if you leave that door open, your legislator might actually call you with that question, because I've done that myself. And so when you get to the meeting, you have your introductions. You have to remember the legislator doesn't know you. When somebody comes in to meet with me, or, you know, when we meet, I tend to meet people at Panera now, because I've had so many people ugly that I meet in public. That's just a fact. So the legislator doesn't know if you're going to come in determined to be angry, if you're going to come in and just give a speech and not give me a chance to speak. The legislator doesn't know what you're going to be like. So you set the tone, quick introductions, and then you set the tone by trying to say something nice. It's like I met with a constituent the other day, and when I walked up, they had on VCDL buttons. And I said, oh my gosh, you're wearing VCDL buttons. I'm a member of VCDL. And it just gave us something in common. So we started off on a friendly note. And it could be something as simple as, I know the district you live in. I drove through there. It's a beautiful place. It must be wonderful to live there. Or I saw you on TV the other day and you were at an event where the governor was speaking. It looked like a great event. I hope you had as much fun as it looked like you did. So just something to break the ice and be nice. You can always find something nice to say. And if that gets too chatty, it's up to you to kind of shift gears and say, I'd love to set up another meeting to talk about that. But today I'm here to talk about parental rights. But say it with a smile. You want to always be smiling. And that can be difficult, but just remember to stay calm, stay relaxed, and smile. So once you get past introductions, you set the tone, and then you get to the conversation. And this is the hard part, because the first thing you have to do is to listen. Remember, the goal of this is not to say what you want to say or say what you want them to hear. The goal is to figure out what they need to know, so that you know what to say. And the only way to know what they need to know is to listen first. So, and I like to call it active listening. When the legislator's talking, don't sit there like we so often do. And again, I've been on the other side of this, so I know what it's like. Don't sit there thinking about what you're going to say next. When she stops talking, I'm going to say this. You need to really be listening, because that's how you're going to learn. What do they know? What are their views? What are their concerns? So you're going to know what they need to know by listening first. And the way to get that started is you need to get them started talking. And if you start with open-ended questions, that's going to get a conversation started. And it can be difficult because the subjects that you're going to be talking to people about, they're difficult subjects. But if you're starting with a friendly tone and you ask an open-ended question, it gets them to talk. So I came up with a couple. Sir, I am really concerned about the sexually explicit books we have in our schools. Are there any books that cause you concern? And then the hard part, you just wait. You asked a question and you wait. And you have to realize the legislator is going to be caught off guard with this, because they're expecting you to come in and give a speech. But instead you're coming in and asking what they think. So, you know, just wait for a minute and listen to what they have to say. And then another one would be, Delegate, I'm really concerned about issues involving parental rights. How involved do you think parents should be in our schools? And then you wait and just give them a minute to regroup and see what they say. And another one could be, abortion's a really difficult issue this year. I know it's difficult, but do you think that decision belongs in the states? So those are ways that you can get the delegate legislator to start talking. And as they talk, you're learning what they need to know. And another way to keep them talking is a technique that I learned called mirroring. And that is simply repeating the last 3 or 4 words that they just said. And this is something you can practice on each other. You can practice it with your friends, because it takes a while to get the hang of it, but I find myself doing it a lot. So like last year, I had a really difficult bill about informed consent for women considering abortion. So when I was talking to another legislator, and they said, we already have informed consent. And I said, we have informed consent? And then wait, let that delegate explain what they think informed consent means and why they think we already have it. And instead of me lecturing on what's not in the code, see what they know, and then I know what to say. Remember, you have a limited amount of time. If you sit there and give a speech, and because I've had this happen, if you sit there and give a speech and you say everything you think they need to know, and then I say, you know what, I've already heard everything you just said, but I don't agree with you because of this. Well, this is what I needed to know, but you didn't cover it because you didn't know what I needed to know, and you're out of time. And another thing that happens is the legislator might say something that you're not expecting, that you've never heard before. Now, you're kind of nervous because you're talking to a legislator, you know you're not in agreement, so you're already a little bit nervous. So you just need to stay calm. If they say something, if she says something you weren't expecting, just stay calm and don't panic, don't get defensive. And this happened to me. I'll give you a real example. I was talking to a senator a couple of weeks ago about a bill I'm carrying this fall, which is a bit controversial. And he brought up an argument I've heard many times over the last few years, but he said it in a way and from a perspective I had never heard. And I didn't have an answer because I'd never heard it before. And I told him that. I said, you know what, Senator, I've been talking about this topic for years and I've never heard that. So I'm going to go and I'm going to do some research and I'm going to look that up. And I'm going to get back with you. And I did. I actually talked to him last week. And I think he was really surprised that I actually bothered to go back, do my homework, look it up, and come back and revisit that conversation. And another thing with being honest and saying, I never thought of that before. You're human, you're being friendly, you're being open, and you're leaving the door open for another chance at another conversation. And so after you figure out what he needs to hear, then you have to figure out how to respond. And it's not always just a matter of saying what you plan to say. It would be nice if it always worked that way. Sometimes it does, but not necessarily. Of all of your tools that you have in your toolbox, which one are you going to pull out to address what he needs to hear? And stories are one. Stories are great, but they tend to be told way too lengthy. If you're going to tell a story, keep it personal, keep it true, not a fictional story. True, personal story, keep it short to the point. If you waste a lot of time with unnecessary information, it's time that you need to make your points. Remember, he can always ask you questions. So short to the point and not a lot of extra information, because he can always ask if there's something that he needs to know. You're being respectful of your time. And when you disagree, stay calm and smile. Always be civil, because you're trying to keep the door open. If you disagree this time, if you can leave the door open, you might be able to make some progress with your next conversation. And I mentioned the time again. So you need to respect the time. Don't expect the delegate to cut the time short. You watch the time, and when it's getting near the end, say, sir, we're almost out of time. If your conversation's going well, you can say, sir, we're almost out of time. I'd love to make an appointment to continue this on another day at your convenience. And you're being respectful of the time. Don't stay over just because you think he's engaged. He probably has other commitments. So don't stay over unless he asks you to stay. You can open that door, go back for another conversation. It gives you time to think about everything and plan for the next conversation. And so don't make it awkward. Never ask them, never put them on the spot of having to ask you to stop talking. So you're going to be friendly and conversational, and you're never going to be challenging or confrontational. And at the end of your meeting, you always want to leave something written. I don't care if it's something you wrote yourself. You can have bullet points written out that you can leave. If it's a magazine from some group that you represent or something written and stapled to that your contact information. And you tell the legislator, no matter how your conversation went, you tell the legislator you're open for conversation. If they have any questions, if they have any second thoughts, if they want your opinion, if they want another perspective, give them your cell phone, your email address, your mailing address, give them everything and be an open door so that they can come back and talk to you again. So you're going to listen first, you're going to respond respectfully. And when you disagree, you will disagree with civility. So that's kind of a different perspective on how to go talk to your legislator. And then I have a list of the don't do's. You got to remember, I've only been in session once. I've had one session and talked to constituents here, and everything on this list has been done to me more than once. So first, don't do gotcha questions. Your goal is to go and have a conversation and end on a good note with an open door. So if you corner the legislator or try to trap, it doesn't go well. So if you ask a question and you see the legislator can't answer and you think in your mind, aha, that's a question you shouldn't have asked. And never look angry. And I know that can be difficult. Trust me, I know how difficult it can be. Don't look smug. Never roll your eyes. And when the legislator's talking, don't shake your head. You shake your head and we know what's in your mind is, oh my gosh, I can't believe she said that. I can't believe she believes that. She is so uninformed. Don't shake your head while the legislator's talking. Stay calm because you'll have your chance to respond. And don't be aggressive. And sometimes you can seem aggressive when you don't need to be, like using you statements. Don't start with you, like, you don't care about parents. You didn't even read The Bluest Eye, or you don't care about the babies. So if you start with you, it's very easy to go into a sentence that feels aggressive on the other end. And don't point. If you talk to me and you're pointing your finger at me, it's aggressive. No matter what it is you're trying to say, it's very unpleasant. So don't point your finger when you're talking. And don't interrupt. I can't tell you how frustrating that is. I met with one lady a couple of weeks ago and she kept interrupting me mid-sentence. There were two of them. And the lady over here kept interrupting me. And so when I was talking, I looked at the lady who didn't interrupt and tried to ignore the lady who was interrupting. And then at one point they asked me a question. When I started to respond, she interrupted and wouldn't even let me. And at that point, I actually told her, I said, we can't have a conversation if you keep interrupting. It'd be great if you'd let me finish my sentence. And she got very defensive, but I couldn't help it. I couldn't let it keep going. It was getting very difficult. And if you interrupt, it's not only rude, you're supposed to be listening. When the legislator's talking, remember you're supposed to be listening. And so you shouldn't be interrupting anyway. And don't be like people who say they want to meet with me, say they want to talk to me, but then they actually treat me with disdain. I actually had a lady last week, and men can be rude too. I keep saying lady. I've had some rude men. But there was a lady last week who was telling me about a book that I had to read. And she said, that is, if you read, most of you don't. And she actually said it. And she actually said it like that. So then at the end of your meeting, it's still not over because you have one thing left to do. I want you to get a note card, get your pen, and write a thank you note. and handwrite the envelope and mail it. It means so much. Even if the meeting didn't go the way you wanted, it's still so nice to say thank you. And that could be something, if the meeting didn't go as well as you wanted, that thank you note, that consideration, that few minutes of your time to say thank you can really change the perspective of the legislator toward the conversation that you have and get you another chance at going through that open door. I appreciate, y'all are doing this because you want to make a difference. And, I want to help you make a difference. I appreciate so much every single person that's willing to go out there and put themselves on the line and step up and do this. I admire you so much. And thank you very much for what you're doing.